I've seen things that are happening that I feel like I'm living in the Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
January 6th. What a crock. If that wasn't a movie production, I would spend my last dollar on earth saying that that was orchestrated by Nancy Pelosi and these demonic Democrats. 2 attempted assassinations on Donald Trump. I have studied them intently. In fact, Gage over here in the glass cage, you gonna put yourself on camera, Gage? Let's show him the glass cage. There's Gage. He and I have been out to Trump International 2 weeks in a row. I have talked to every single person on the sidewalks, in the streets, at the post office. We've talked to some eyewitnesses who were there. And, you know, I have no security training at all. I know nothing about protecting an asset. But I am reasonably smart, and I've got 2 eyes, and I've got some common sense, and I have gone to that venue. There are 2 holes, hole 5 and 6. 5 is along Congress, 6 is along Summit. And then, stick with me here just a second.
Sure.
I live 6 blocks from Southern Boulevard, where Trump comes and goes from his Mar-a-Lago estate to the Palm Beach airport. It's a 10-minute ride. I have never seen the spectacle of law enforcement that I've seen since Butler. They've got more law enforcement. They've got Army guys with helmets on and night vision. I mean, it is unbelievable. Last Sunday, they had 50 motorcycle cops from Palm Beach County, Broward County, the State Patrol. You have never seen the display of law enforcement ever, except for when Netanyahu was here. Wow. Leading me to wonder, where in the hell was the protection 2 weeks ago at Trump International? You could have taken one of those 50 motorcycle cops and positioned him on the north corner. You could have put one on the south corner, both with binoculars looking at each other, and one on the west corner. You would have covered virtually the entire exposed perimeter of Trump International Golf Course. But they didn't. What it says to me is that they opened the door and said, hey, come on in. But then they put on this spectacle like, oh, look at what we're doing to protect Trump. Look at how effective we are. And it's just a menage.
I mean, you're a JFK assassination buff. I mean, you know, the stand down orders and all that stuff. That seems to be part of this, right? Is the insiders that allow it to happen. And I think that's what you're looking at here. I hope it is properly investigated. I hope those individuals, I mean, you're looking at like treason charges. Like this ain't even like if you had a law, you know, if our legal institutions were not controlled by the bar, that is basically allowing the potential assassination of a president is treason.
I vote Republican. I've been a Republican most of my life. I care about the truth. I care about honesty. I care about the Bible and God. The things that these people have done. I had dinner with Ted Cruz a year ago. And there were 12 of us sitting around this table, and he was a delightful individual, by the way. I asked him about JFK's assassination because some people, including Donald Trump, believe that his dad had a role in it. Got kind of uncomfortable there for a minute. But really? Then towards the end of the dinner, we started talking about Biden, and everybody was going off on him. And I said, I do not think that we should impeach Joe Biden. Dead silence. Where is this going? I said, we should try him for treason. And that's what I honestly believe. He's taken millions of dollars, $3 million that Jamie Comer has proven from the Chinese, a company that with direct ties to the CCP. And then Biden, our Defense Department, watched a spy balloon leave China, float across the Pacific, enter into Canada, and dip down into the United States, where it lingered for 5 days.
Yeah.
And then we shoot it down over the Atlantic after the mission is completed.
Yeah.
My God, where is the outrage? If that is not evidence of his mental, not his mental state, of his corrupt state, I don't know what is it. To me, it says it all.
You know, the inherent issue here is that, yes, these are legitimate legal ideas that you're talking about. But when you have your legal societies really controlled by the bar, which could be classified as an unlawful monopoly because it's not like they control the business of law. And it is a business, it is an industry. So I see an inherent issue there with how the whole thing's been set up. And I think it's been set up intentionally that way, because as you probably know that like every single one of us is committing 3 felonies a day, according to evidence out there in terms of how they stack these laws, right? So they could selectively persecute anybody. That to me is one of the most authoritarian devices that they have against us, because they could shut any one of us up at any given time. Now, why is it set up that way? Why isn't there a competing bar? When we look at monopolies and we say, okay, Microsoft's a monopoly, that is a monopoly that's controlling the computer world, the software world, right? The same thing could be said about the bar. So why is that not addressed? Well, the mechanisms whereby which you would address that is our checks and balances. But you have a situation here where 2 or 3 branches of government are actually held hostage by the bar because the judiciary is all bar agents. And then you have your Congress, which is 75% bar agents that are essentially creating laws in order to facilitate the needs of the bar and not the needs of we the people. So there's the way that whole thing's been structured. And then you get back into topics like the original 13th Amendment, which prohibited lawyers from being in Congress because logic would dictate that if you have lawyers filling up the judiciary, why destroy your checks and balances by having them occupy Congress? So the Congress was always intended by the founders, I believe, for priests, business people to dip in there after they have success in regular life, come in there for a term or 2 and then return back to their regular life. But instead, what's happened is it's become this, essentially bunch of parasites that go in there to make themselves rich. They could give a rat's ass about we the people, and they do whatever the hell they want. And they go in there, with 200,000 in the bank, they come out with 100 million in the bank. So
and their wives become uber wealthy.
It's like that would be actually against the insider trading regulations, but they don't get held accountable. It's all corruption. Yeah.
Well, you make an interesting point about the bar that I haven't really considered. I've been a member of the Georgia bar since 1979. I'm not sure that it was intentional when the bar was established. I actually became a lawyer at the tail end of when being a lawyer was a gentlemanly profession.
Yeah. Yeah.
People took great pride in treating each other with respect. There was an unwritten code that you acted and behaved as a gentleman, and that you had ethics, and that it was basically self-policing.
Yeah.
But just like the United States government, I think the United States government and the United States Constitution are perfect institutions, and the Constitution is a wonderful, I think near perfect governing document.
Yeah.
But it's morphed. The whole society has morphed. And this is one of the things that I ponder a lot, I'm sorry.
It's feminism. It's all feminism. And people have been, essentially groomed to be scared to say that. This is all feminism. This is third wave feminism, because that whole honors-based society, and I know all about that because I've studied law, the history of law, where it was honor-based because men were groomed to be gentlemen. This was an era of opening doors for women, right? But then when women started these attacks against masculinity and via third wave feminism, all of a sudden, there's a lot of things that happened there where the fathers were removed from the family. 90% of our prison population is single moms. You look at what's happened there. This whole thing has been completely destructive. Honor has left our legal fields because, unfortunately, and this might sound nasty, but I don't think a lot of these third wave feminists have that sense of honor, because they see honor comes from facts, right? You follow the facts. When you change that with emotion, that's when the danger happens. And a lot of what's been introduced into our legal fields has been emotion-based, right? It's not, and you can't, it's like talking to leftists. You can't convince somebody that's coming from emotion that they are heading down the wrong path. And I think that's what this third wave feminism has introduced into our legal world, into our politics, where now people react based upon emotion as opposed to actual facts and based on honor.
Well, you make an interesting point. I was going in a slightly different direction. I guess the perspective that I've thought a lot about is that when I was younger, there was a tremendous amount of poverty and illiteracy in our country. And the differences between being really, really rich and really, really poor were vast. Even though they're, I'm kind of thinking this through as I'm speaking, the ultra rich have really gone to a new level altogether in our country. But there is still a large middle class, and I think that there has been a lot of improvement in terms of education, literacy, and getting rid of poverty in our country. But here's my question. If you accept that as the hypothesis, it seems like the more prosperous we become and the better educated we become, the more demonic our society becomes. And it seems like we would move towards being respectful of one another as opposed to the direction that I see the country taking. The Democratic Party, I would have argued 20 or 30 years ago, was a party of free speech, women's rights, freedom of religion. Those were democratic principles. Now, the very people who are supposed to be for women's rights are allowing transgender people to come and compete in women's sports. That's not standing up for women's rights. And the people that have championed themselves, ushering in civil rights and protecting black people's rights and elevating them in society, have brought in 15 million illegal aliens from Mexico, Central and South America, and they're stealing the jobs from the black community. That's not taking up for blacks. So it's very much a dichotomy to me of what we see and how things have changed so dramatically. Hence, the Republicans are the ones that are now becoming the working class party.
There's a saying that came to mind as you were talking. The idle mind is the devil's playground. And I think the more luxury we have in our world, the more that we have, the more we become that idle mind, and we allow evil things in. And, again, let's talk about scripture, Adam and Eve, like the evil was led into the Garden of Eden because of temptation that the female went through. These are lessons that I think we need to definitely pay attention to, because a lot of what we're talking about here is the fact that we have become too spoiled. I think this is a matter of being spoiled, not knowing the privilege that you have. And I think the whole thing's been set up is wrong, right? Let's look at Israel as an example, okay? In Israel, which is a very successful country, there's a great book called Startup Nation in terms of, the tech in Israel. But what happens in Israel? When somebody turns 16 or 17, they have to go do time in a kibbutz, right? Communal, okay? What happens in those kibbutz? You learn discipline. You learn really the importance of what's happening in the world, why you need to protect that land, right? There's no such mechanism in the United States. So a spoiled child grows up completely detached from what the real world is, okay? Like with their cars, and I see it all the time where these kids don't have any semblance of reality of what the world is. Their values are all screwed up, right? And that I think is because we're a spoiled country. We've had it too good for a long time. And right now, it seems as though there's times coming where those good times are about to go away, and we're about to see what the struggles of the rest of the world look like. And I think that's going to be a big time course correction. And I think we need that. We need that. And I have ancestors and family in different countries. I know what's going on over there. And I think a lot of the original kind of people that came in the 1700s had that attachment to the tyranny and all that nastiness that was over there. So they appreciated this. And a lot of Americans don't have that right now. They don't have that perspective, and that's actually one of the reasons why I do this sort of work, is because I do have that perspective. I know, I'm of Armenian descent. I know what Armenia looks like. I know what these former Soviet republics look like. So I know how good we have it, and that is the course correction there that needs to happen. People need to know, like, we are truly privileged. This is, people say, oh, this is such a bad country. Well, give me the example of, what this utopia that you're dreaming about is out there.
Vem, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I had this virtual, identical conversation with Secretary Ross, Wilbur Ross, who just published a new book and came on The Truth to talk about it. And he said that we have developed a generation of hypersensitive males. And if you look at them crossways, they'd fall apart. ACLU, by the way, American Civil Liberties Union, that's what I was trying to bring from back here.
Oh, yes, yeah.
I think that it was done with good intentions. I mean, my wife and I wanted to make life better for our children than we had it. We had it really good. But I think the difference between my parents and our generation's parents were that my parents did not prevent me from failing. They did not catch me if I fell. They allowed me to experience life and learn from the experiences and learn some very hard lessons. And we've tried to, I think, with all good intentions, create this fantasy world for our children. Now they get out in the real world and they find out, well, it's not like I thought it was. This really is hard.
It's this fictitious reality that they're going into, and this idea that we're supposed to be happy all the time. And if you're not happy, take this pill and it'll take your depression away. Pain is the greatest teacher. If you're not learning, then you're not growing. And I think a lot of these men, and I felt this, by the way, when I was growing up. I don't think we had it hard enough, coming up in the 80s, 90s, right? But we definitely had a much more of a perspective of the world than these kids do nowadays, because a tweet will make some of these kids fall apart. And you look at like the feminizing of men. We do a lot of that topic on the America Happens Network, where our food, our water, clearly men that are being chemically castrated and they don't even know it. And that tells you a lot, And the last thing I want to say is the role of men in all of this equation. We've been brainwashed into thinking that, men and women are equal, which is the biggest BS on the world. In the world, that is the biggest BS. Men and women are not equal. I'm sorry. If men are not the protectors of society, women are not equipped to protect society. Women, as we've seen, predominantly vote Democrat out of the most selfish principles, which is abortion. So to them, murdering a child on the majority of women that are voting is paramount to everything else happening in the world, it seems. So to me, whereas men is like, men most of the time vote out of logic, not out of emotion. They vote for, their future, their children, society. This false notion that, men and women, like women could be as great leaders as men and all that stuff. I'm sorry, I know it sounds sexist me saying that. By today's standards, a complete falsity. If you look at why we're out of the caves, for example, 99.99999% of things that got us out of the caves and this evolution happening. And I'm not talking about Darwin's evolution. I'm talking about evolution and technology, thought, all that stuff. The work of men, you unplug that, and we've seen the unplugging of that, and look at the disaster this country's become in a matter of decades, So we got to get back to reality, and men have to start embracing their roles as leaders and stop being these whiny simps. So,
Well, I think you make very good points on many issues. Biologically, men and women are not the same. Now, there are some women who are stronger than a lot of other women. Some of those women are stronger than some men. Mm-hmm. But we're talking about a world population of 7.5 billion people. Mm-hmm. Men are built differently than women. Okay. I mean, I don't know any women that are like Wilt Chamberlain or pick your player or your favorite baseball player. I mean, they're constructed differently. Yeah. I don't think that's something that men need to apologize for, and I don't think that we need to ignore the reality. I guess what I would say, and you may or may not agree, I think women should be afforded the same opportunity as men. I don't believe in a glass ceiling. I think that if a woman wants to choose to go into the workforce and that she wants to climb the corporate ladder, she should have every opportunity to do so. I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, the girls always were the ones who got the A's. I was a C student, happy to get a C. The girls were smarter than most of the guys, and I'm happy to give that to them, you know? It's not universally true, but I know my wife's smarter than I am. She's in the next room listening. So
yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I think women have to have the same opportunities, but we can't live in this fictitious world anymore where we're all equal, and it's just not. Women are not wired like men are wired, and I think that's actually been a huge disaster, this third wave feminism, where you have these males now competing in these female competition, and half the women out there are embracing it. They're saying that, if the person identifies as a female, they're a female. And again, I don't think these kind of loose type morals, loose type ideas would have succeeded if it wasn't for third wave feminism. I think that opened the door, and now we have these ridiculous ideas, including, you could castrate a child because a 7-year-old thinks they're a girl. I mean, the gateway to this nonsense and evil was feminism, and then second wave feminism, and then third wave feminism. And what I think you and I agree on is first wave feminism, which is that women should have the same opportunity, same pay, same that, right?
100%. But
100%.
Riley Gaines should not have to have spent her entire life reaching to be an Olympic swimmer to find her dream shattered because some dude shows up in a bikini claiming to be a woman. I think that is the most absurd, ridiculous thing I've ever seen or heard in my life. It is devoid of common sense. But the thing that boggles my mind, the NCAA is permitting it. And they will say behind closed doors, according to Riley Gaines, that we don't think that, we don't believe that should happen. We don't think that should happen. But in public, they're permitting it.
It's cowardice. It's cowardice, And I'm going to make a statement here that you've probably never, ever heard this one. It's probably going to be very inflammatory. But again, something that comes to mind is that, so I'm of Armenian descent, right? We're an ancient people. We've actually been around for thousands of years, like the Jews, okay? Like other cultures. There is very few cultures that have been around for as long as Armenians and Jews. Very few. And I don't think there is, if you look at like history, it's like, I don't think there is actually any other culture. But there are some that have been around thousands of years. I think Armenian Jews, we're looking at 7,000 year history that is verifiable, and even getting more and more as they do archaeological findings, right? The way the Armenians and Jews and other races that have been around for a long time have survived is what today is defined as sexism and racism. What is defined today as sexism and racism is the reason these ancient people are still around, because they made choices to protect their communities. By today's standards, if you ask somebody like a Kamala Harris or some of these leftists, what do they define that as? They'll say that's sexist and racist. But that's how these people have survived that long. Amongst mixing of cultures, amongst a lot of crazy ideas, amongst the fall of the Roman Empire and the fall of the Ottoman Empire, and literally emperor, Byzantine Empire, by the way, you know what I mean? It's like, how many people could claim that? But the way they were able to do that is protecting their culture, their morals. Just something to think about, in terms of who influences us, their words, their definitions, and what really holds true when you look at human history.
Vem Miller, it has been a pleasure speaking with you today. You've certainly given us a lot to think about. I'm sure it will stimulate a lot of conversation. The phone lines are lighting up. Unfortunately, we committed Vem for an hour and we've used it up, but you can find him on the American Happens Network and tune in to his Blood Money podcast. So the website would just Google American Happens Network or AHN. What's the domain?
AmericaHappens.com, and I highly recommend people to go on there because that's our portal to all of our different broadcasting sites, which includes Rumble, X. Also, we got on Smart TV about 2 months ago. We're on Amazon Fire, Apple TV. and Roku, and just, check us out, subscribe. We actually have a featured section at the top of that website, which has a documentary called Bundy versus Deep State. I highly, highly recommend people watch it. It's going to blow you away. You've never seen something like this, unfortunately, due to the events that happened in the filing of this lawsuit, which the lawsuit's also available on the site. People could actually read it, because this is something that's repeatable across all states in order for us to get our freedoms back from a tyrannical federal government. So I highly recommend people check that out. And also the JFK documentary. We got so much good stuff in our featured section in terms of the work that we do. Over 700 episodes, but in our featured section, we have about 20 of the best things. All that I recommend that people check out.
Well, I think the difference between JFK's assassination and the attempt on Donald Trump's life, it took 65 years for us to really discover the truth on JFK's assassination. Yeah. It took about 6 hours for people like you and myself. I hope I play a small role. Don Bongino and the other YouTubers who are out there scouring every bit of information they can. And I think that what we really need, I think about this stuff every day. How are we going to get the genie back in the bottle? How do we get the train back on the track? I think it is going to require a citizens' revolt, a citizens' peaceful revolution. And we can push back against these evil forces, and we just have to keep doing it like you're doing every day, and I'm trying to do my part. Thank you so much, Vem, for coming on The Truth today, and I hope you'll come back soon and often.